What's going on, folks? I'm going to talk about a reality that keeps many of us up at night. Now, I know y'all know that scene in Boys in the Hood where Trey and Rick gets pulled over and that crooked black cop shoves a gun right under Trey's chin. Now, I know that scene's been mocked by the Wayans brothers where Bertie Mac played the cop, and I know we've also mocked the scene of how Trey reacted to that experience when he got home, to where he's swinging and punching the air and all that. I'm tired of this shit. But hey, at least he got some after that. but when we watched this movie as kids back in the '90s, I think the reason why we've all mocked it and made fun of those scenes was because we were all thinking they were, what film critics would call plot points to keep the movie going. But as I've started navigating this world years later as a grown man, I've realized that it was a warning. And though Trey and Rick didn't do nothing wrong, but they were trapped in an environment with people with no hope. And Trey and Rick, these were the good dudes, but because they were black, they get pulled over and they were being grouped with the thugs and gangbangers in the hood that was out there robbing and shooting each other. And then they're getting dragged into these beefs that they didn't even ask for. And it's sad because there's plenty of decent brothers who go through this all the time. But it's like at the same time, when you want to step outside of your neighborhood into white dominated spaces like schools, corporate offices, and suburban areas, you're going to be facing a different kind of rejection because it's like you're walking into a space where people have already made up their minds about who you are before you even open your mouth. They see your skin color, and because of decades of biased media and political messaging, they view you as a threat or an outsider. And we talk about that all the time, like how we always got to keep our guard up when we're stepping into their neighborhoods, like dealing with racial profiling, how the system is being rigged against us, and just the feeling of being a guest who's only being tolerated rather than being accepted. And honestly, that all comes down to fear because even if you do everything right, you acting polite, you get your education, you carrying yourself like a professional, you're still fighting this constant silent battle. You're fighting the feeling that they don't think you belong, like you're just too black for their comfort zone. But the crazy part is that the pressure doesn't let up when you cross back over to your own community because whether you're dealing with the quiet rejection out there in their world or the crazy, unpredictable drama on your own streets, it's like you're constantly playing chess just to make it through the day. And when you combine these two sides, you get the nowhere to run reality. And in that movie, Boys in the Hood, that was a history lesson of why things are the way they are. We can't just blame that cop in the movie because he was just a tool for politicians. Because back in 91, which was the same year this movie came out, the government chose to stop helping black neighborhoods, jobs, and schools and decided to focus more on being tough and building more prisons. And then there was the war zone excuse, like how Trump was calling Haiti and Africa shithole countries. Politicians was calling these neighborhoods war zones on purpose by making them sound like dangerous places. And they was convincing the public that it was okay for police to treat black men like enemies instead of citizens, and that trap was intentional. They want to blame the individual, but they never want to talk about the environment they built around them. Because the truth is that nobody starts out with that kind of hatred or anger in their heart because people are just products of their own environment. Just like with racism, nobody comes into this world being racist because we're almost in 2027. And I really wish we could say racism is dead and long gone, it's history. But unfortunately, it's going to be around to the end of time because we see the proof of this survival trap in the news every single day. Because look at what keeps happening to our young, athletic, successful brothers when they stepping into spaces they ain't welcome in. We see these type of news reports constantly. A young man goes out to have fun, ends up in an environment where he's the only black person and never makes it back home. And when the family looks for answers, the system just says no foul play and sweeps it under the rug. It ain't just that you might be in harm's way. It's just that when you are, the people in power don't even care to investigate why. And seeing stuff like this is just a wake-up call, because it forces you to realize that no matter where we go, whether if we're navigating their world or back home in our own neighborhood, we're never going to be able to just relax and be left alone, because we're constantly fighting just to survive. And when we're being forced to choose our battles between these two worlds, where do we go to find some peace? Because at the end of the day, you're looking at what Ricky Smiley said, the damned if you do, damned if you don't reality. He just did a video on this not too long ago on the problems of living in an all black, all white neighborhood. Because it's like you're fighting for your life on two different sides. You got a system that's designed to cage you, and a street culture trying to pull you down. And I mean, we talk about systemic racism, but we don't talk enough about the real damage that it do. Because when you stripping resources from a community and leaving it to rot, the violence turns inward, and it becomes a cycle. And as a result of that cycle, that means you gotta look over your shoulder at the corner store, whether where you being constantly on guard against a brother who looks just like you but sees you as the enemy. But if you move out into an all-white community, you're moving into spaces where you're constantly being watched, profiled, and treated like you don't belong there. And I mean, we're hated on both sides, but where's the survival? And I'm not just talking shit, because I've experienced this myself in real life. I know exactly what that pressure feels like, because I've been to majority black schools where I got bullied and fucked with just for being different. And I've been to majority white schools where I had to deal with that cold, quiet racism. There were some white kids who didn't want me in their spaces, like at lunch. They didn't want me sitting at their table. And I hated school so much that I wanted to be homeschooled, because I felt like locking myself away in my own house was the only peaceful solution to a rigged system. And it's crazy, because Ricky Smiley confessed that he even thought about putting his own kids in homeschool just to protect them from the trap. But I do agree with what he said about realizing that kids need to experience life. They got to know how to deal with shit, because they're going to have to deal with people eventually, because at the end of the day, they got to work, and you just can't avoid society forever. But the best that I could do is find diverse areas. That's the only way we can breathe. Finding diverse areas, places that ain't 100% one way or the other. Because in a more balanced, diverse community, you got access to safer streets and just better resources all around. You're around other people who understand your path, because they're walking it in it too. And you stop being a target and start being a part of the community. You ain't got to be the tough guy or the guest. You could just do you. And finding those type of places is just more than a move. It's a chance at survival. Because look, I'm seeing this reality play out in my own city every single day. Like, there's an area not too far from me that's majority white. But as you're leaving it, the whole vibe changes. It gets blacker and blacker until suddenly you're in the hood. Now me, I'm right in the middle. I'm living in a decent area amongst hardworking black people. They don't bother me. Everybody minds their business. And being in that in-between space means I get to see both sides of the cage. I see how the streets are divided clear as day. But remember, just packing up and leaving the hood ain't magic. You got to be smart about it. Trey survived the streets because Furious taught him how to think, not just how to run. And if you want to survive the trap, you got to learn how to think for yourself first. But that's just my perspective. Let me know what you think in the comments. This is Big Brother signing out. I'm out. Peace.